Imagine your child sitting quietly in their bedroom, talking to someone who isn't there. They laugh, they answer questions, they even wave goodbye as if someone just left the room. When you ask who they were speaking to, they calmly reply, "The lady standing behind you." Many parents have experienced moments like this. Children often report seeing things adults cannot: invisible friends, shadowy figures, and voices calling their names in empty rooms. Sometimes these experiences appear harmless and playful. Other times they can feel deeply unsettling. A child might whisper that someone is standing in the hallway, or that a person sits beside their bed every night. When adults look around, they see nothing. So what is really happening? For centuries, cultures around the world have shared a similar belief, that children exist closer to the spiritual world than adults do. According to ancient folklore, the innocence of childhood allows young minds to perceive things that older minds have forgotten how to see. In parts of Europe, it was once believed that children could see spirits because their souls had not yet become hardened by life. In some Asian traditions, children were thought to possess a temporary connection to the unseen world that slowly fades as they grow older. Certain indigenous cultures also hold the belief that young children remain connected to the spiritual realm for several years after birth. Across these traditions, the explanation is remarkably similar. Children can see what adults cannot because adulthood closes the door to that perception. But modern science approaches the question very differently. Instead of assuming supernatural explanations, psychologists study how the human mind develops during childhood. They have discovered that between the ages of 3 and 7, a child's imagination reaches its most powerful stage. During these early years, the brain is developing rapidly. Children are learning language, exploring emotions, forming social understanding, and building their mental model of reality. Their minds are constantly experimenting with possibilities and interpretations of the world around them. One of the most fascinating results of this development is the creation of imaginary companions. Studies suggest that a large percentage of children invent some form of imaginary friend during early childhood. These companions can take many forms. Sometimes they are invisible people with names, personalities, and favorite activities. Sometimes they are animals, monsters, or magical creatures. In other cases, they are simply a presence that only the child can perceive. Psychologists generally view imaginary friends as a healthy part of development. These companions allow children to practice conversation and social interaction. They provide comfort when children feel lonely or anxious. They allow children to explore emotions and situations that might otherwise be difficult to understand. Through imaginative play, children learn empathy, communication, and problem-solving. In most cases, imaginary companions disappear naturally as a child grows older. As the brain matures, the boundary between imagination and reality becomes clearer. Logical reasoning strengthens, and children begin interpreting the world in ways that more closely resemble adult thinking. However, not every story fits neatly into the category of imagination. Parents around the world have reported situations where children describe people they have never met. Sometimes the descriptions seem strangely detailed. A child might talk about an elderly man who used to live in the house decades earlier. Another might describe a relative who passed away long before the child was born. In certain stories, children even provide details about clothing, personality, or conversations that seem impossible for them to know. These rare cases have fascinated researchers studying childhood perception and memory. But what makes them even more intriguing is how similar the stories are across cultures. Children from completely different countries and backgrounds often describe the same kinds of experiences. They talk about figures standing quietly in doorways, someone sitting at the edge of the bed, a voice calling their name when no one else is around. Why do these patterns appear so often? Scientists studying childhood perception believe several psychological and neurological factors may explain these experiences. The first involves sensory sensitivity. Young children experience the world very differently than adults. Their brains are still learning how to interpret sensory information, and as a result, ordinary environmental details can appear far more dramatic. A shadow cast by a moving curtain might look like a person standing in the room. A faint sound from another part of the house might resemble a whisper or voice. Reflections of light can transform familiar shapes into unfamiliar figures. Adults, with years of experience interpreting sensory information, quickly dismiss these illusions. Their brains automatically filter out details that are unlikely to be important. Children, however, are still developing these filtering systems. When they encounter something unfamiliar or ambiguous, their brains may interpret it in a more imaginative or literal way. Another explanation involves a fascinating neurological state known as hypnagogia. Hypnagogic experiences occur during the transition between waking and sleeping. During this state, the brain begins dreaming while the body is still partially awake. People in this state may see vivid images, hear voices, or feel the presence of someone nearby. Many adults occasionally experience hypnagogia, particularly when they are extremely tired. However, children experience it far more frequently. Because their sleep cycles are still developing, the boundary between dreaming and waking can blur more easily. A child lying in bed might briefly enter this dreamlike state while still conscious. During that moment, the brain may create images or sounds that feel completely real. To the child, it may truly seem as if someone is standing in the room or speaking to them. But even these explanations do not solve every mystery. Some stories remain difficult to explain completely. In rare situations, children describe individuals connected to the history of a home or family in ways that appear remarkably accurate. These stories often attract attention from researchers, historians, and paranormal investigators. However, scientists emphasize an important point. Human memory is extremely flexible. Our brains do not store memories like recordings. Instead, each time we remember something, the brain reconstructs the event using fragments of information. Parents and relatives may unintentionally influence how a child's story evolves over time. A vague description can gradually become more detailed as adults interpret and retell the story. Over months or years, these interpretations can reshape the memory itself. Psychologists call this process memory reconstruction, and it affects everyone. Even so, the phenomenon remains fascinating. One reason childhood experiences feel so vivid may be related to how the developing brain processes imagination. During early childhood, neural pathways responsible for creativity, emotion, and perception are extremely active. At the same time, the areas of the brain responsible for critical reasoning are still developing. This combination allows imagined experiences to feel extraordinarily realistic. When children imagine something, their brains may process it almost as if it were truly happening. Another important factor involves how children interpret ambiguity. Adults rely heavily on logic and prior experience when evaluating unusual situations. When something strange occurs, adults immediately search for rational explanations. Children approach the world differently. Their understanding of reality is still forming, and they are more open to imaginative interpretations. For a child, the idea of unseen visitors or hidden beings may seem just as plausible as any other explanation. Interestingly, many adults remember having similar experiences when they were young. People often recall seeing figures in the hallway at night or hearing someone call their name when no one else was around. As they grew older, those experiences disappeared and were eventually dismissed as imagination. This change may reflect how the brain develops over time. As we age, our brains become far more efficient at filtering sensory information. We prioritize details that help us function in everyday life and quickly dismiss anything that seems ambiguous or irrelevant. Children, however, absorb far more raw sensory input from their surroundings. Some scientists believe this openness may contribute to the vivid perceptions children sometimes report. In other words, children may not necessarily see more than adults do, but they may interpret what they see very differently. This raises an intriguing philosophical question. What if childhood perception is not simply less accurate than adult perception, but differently tuned? After all, the human brain does not present reality exactly as it exists. Everything we see, hear, and feel is filtered through complex neurological processes. Our brains constantly simplify and organize information so we can navigate the world efficiently. In that sense, perception itself is always a form of interpretation. Children may simply be interpreting the world through a different set of filters. filters shaped by imagination, curiosity, and a developing understanding of reality. Throughout history, these experiences have inspired myths, legends, and spiritual traditions. Stories of children speaking with invisible companions appear in cultures across the world. Some traditions interpret these encounters as spiritual gifts, while others view them as warnings or signs of supernatural presence. Modern science, however, approaches the phenomenon by studying the brain rather than assuming supernatural explanations. The more scientists learn about perception, the more they realize how complex it truly is. Vision is not simply a camera recording reality. It is a dynamic process involving memory, emotion, expectation, and interpretation. Even adults experience perceptual illusions every day without realizing it. We misinterpret sounds. We overlook details. We fill in missing information automatically. In many ways, the mystery of children seeing things adults cannot may reveal something deeper about human consciousness itself. Perhaps the real question is not whether children see ghosts or spirits. Perhaps the question is why the human brain sometimes creates experiences that feel completely real, even when no physical source exists. For parents, these moments can still feel unsettling. When a child calmly says someone is standing in the corner of the room, it can send a chill down the spine. Experts generally advise parents to respond calmly and supportively. Asking gentle questions can help children describe what they are experiencing without fear. In most cases, the experiences fade naturally with time. As children grow older, their understanding of reality becomes more structured. Imaginary companions disappear. Nighttime visitors stop appearing. The unseen world gradually fades away. Yet one mystery remains. Why do children across different cultures describe such similar experiences? Figures standing quietly in doorways, someone sitting at the edge of the bed, a friendly voice in an empty room. Are these simply products of imagination, or do they reveal something deeper about how the human mind perceives reality? Scientists are still searching for the answer. In the next episode, we will explore some of the most famous cases of children reporting encounters with the unexplained. Some of these stories have puzzled scientists for decades, and a few remain unexplained even today.